Ladies and gents, welcome to Suji Reaction. This is History Makers, Dante, the channel all Sarcastic production. Mr. Inferno himself, Dante. I looked at that, Inferno video of Dante, Legend Summarized, I think. Is that the title? I don't know, yeah. That's a comedy, apparently. Everybody knows that's one of the most funny shit of all time, right? All the circles of hell, torment, and everything. Yeah, it's just damn funny. So I guess this is about the history of Dante. I guess all the details about Dante is going to be fun. And also remember, what video was that? One of the history videos. History hijinks type of videos, I think it was. Where, about how Florence asked for Dante's remains or something. And they gave the tomb, sealed tomb. But apparently they took out his remains. And then they realized that they took out his remains, but they couldn't say anything because it's not, it's not right to open a sealed tomb or something. So yeah, that is just ridiculous. So this is gonna be a fun video. From the visionary creator who brought you the self-insert fanfic Combs, yeah, the invention of world building and the most revolutionary literature in history. Whoa, that was unexpected. Grab your nearest Virgil because we are about to dive into Dante's complex afterlife and learn how a Florentine poet used an ancient genre of poetry to kickstart what would become the Renaissance. Dante kickstarted the Renaissance? What? For the reading, I would highly recommend Alan Mandelbaum's translation of the Divine Comedy. Yeah, specifically because it features an opposite-facing translation, so the English appears directly adjacent to the original Italian. Regardless of your familiarity with Italian, Dante's use of language is beautiful to listen to. It's also just good translation in general. Please do yourself. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Dante kickstarted the Renaissance. What? That's a bit heavy. It's pretty significant. I didn't know that. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun video. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. I did this link in the description. Check out the cast with different playlists. I have only Sarcastic, production, reaction, history, internet historian, CGP great, here zoo. Yeah, let's do this one.
Dante Alighieri, the medieval Italian poet who told several popes to go to hell and then followed through with a detailed description of their fiery eternal torment.
Yeah.
Gee, that even makes Martin Luther sound pretty tame by comparison. When he isn't pining over his long-lost love Beatrice or hanging on to every word from his Roman senpai and afterlife travel guide Virgil, Dante was starting the cultural and philosophical trends that would culminate in the Florentine Renaissance 1 century later. But there's a lot more to Dante Alighieri than literary fangirling and uncomfortably graphic depictions of never-ending hellish torture. Dante's work is both an extremely detailed historical analysis of the problems with his contemporary society and an innovation in world building that draws from millennia of religious precedent. So, to peer behind the hellfire and figure out how Dante went about creating one of the most transformative works in all of literature, as well as why he wrote the Divine Comedy in the first place, let's do some history. Let's start at the beginning.
Divine Comedy. That is something, isn't it? Dante cannot do anything about the Pope and everything, so only thing he can do about it is write. So I guess he wrote all that angrily, all the things, how a Pope is going to suffer in the hell and everything, all circles of hell.
Dante was born in the Italian Republic of Florence in 1265, in the midst of a multi-century power struggle between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor. In theory, the Holy Roman Empire was one nice big state governed by an emperor and spiritually presided over by the Pope, but in practice, the emperor's control over the many states in the HRE was touchy at best, and the popes often got grabby with the lands of their Italian neighbors. So rather than working neatly as a team, they played more like schoolyard rivals. By Dante's time, Florence was one of many—
That is ridiculous. That Holy Roman Empire, permission by Pope. There was always this power struggle, right? Pope is seen as Pope is the one who crowns somebody an emperor, but emperor also has some political power here and there. So there was always struggle between who has the real power or something. That was just ridiculous. Knowing the head of the church, head of a religion, is kind of acting in a power grab situation of an empire just feels weird.
Many Italian cities split between sympathies to the emperor and to the pope. One faction would gain the upper hand and exile their enemies, those exiles would grab some spears and take revenge, rinse and repeat for 200 years. Gotta love medieval politics. But a 24-year-old Dante helped kick the Ghibellines out of Florence for good by fighting in the Battle of Campaldino in 1289. Now this was all well and fine while the Pope was chill, but before too long, St. Peter's throne was filled by none other than Pope Boniface VIII, whom you might remember for probably murdering his predecessor Celestine V during the first Pope fights video.
Oh yeah, the monk who didn't want the job. Yeah, he was just there for a few months and he's like, you know what, I want to quit. And then this guy came around and he's like, yeah, you can quit, but I think I'm gonna kill you. So he basically put him in cell and killed him. And I guess Philip IV of France, I think, called a hit on the Boniface, and then he died. I guess that's the story if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, this guy. Some Florentines weren't huge fans of Boniface on account of how eager he was to glomp onto his surrounding territories and spread his political influence. Also, throwing the last pope in jail and leaving him to die. That probably factored into people's approval of the guy. So part of the Guelph faction split from the...
Yeah, during the Pope fights, we know that before him, that, Monk, and before the infighting between how one Pope just comes and just leaves because he gets married or something. Then he comes back again. It's like, okay, you know what? I want my throne back. Then he goes away again. Then after some time, he comes back again. Like, okay, third time I want my throne back. There was just stupid infighting. And then this guy comes with pretty strong ideas. Like, I'm going to jail the last Pope, kill him. I'm going to take the territories. People like, whoa.
Pact to tell Boniface to beat it, while many remained firmly committed to the Pope despite his belligerent and skis-bally qualities. It's at this politically fragmented time that Dante first jumped into the politics of Florence. Given that Mr. Alighieri isn't widely remembered for a long career in the Florentine civil service, you might be able to guess where this one's going. Dante was a Guelph like his father, but soon schism time came and he needed to side with either the Neri or the Bianchi. As context clues might have implied, Dante sided with the White Guelphs against Boniface. As a member of the Apothecaries Guild, he had the privilege of serving in the governing Signoria. This was cool until it very swiftly wasn't, because in 1301 the Pope scheduled Florence for an appointment with an invading French army. Boniface had sent the King of France's brother to Tuscany as a nominal peacemaker, but the suspiciously large size of his army left many Florentines a little bit antsy, so Florence sent a delegation to Rome to figure out exactly what was going on. But while Dante and friends were out doing diplomacy, the French stormed Florence, sacked the city, and installed a new government full of black Guelphs. Dante only learned what had happened while he was already on his way back to Florence. Adding to his shock, any white Guelphs who weren't killed in the sack were automatically sentenced to exile, which has to make this the absolute worst business trip in history. Dante spent the rest of his life hopping...
Now really, what about that guy during the World Wars, in the Japan? Who survived both nuclear bombs, right? I guess somebody in the comment said that, and it just reminded me of that. I guess he first survived Hiroshima and then went to Nagasaki or something and survived there, and lived all the way until pretty recently, I guess. In 2008 or 2009, if I don't remember his name because it's not easy name to remember. But yeah, he survived both bombs and then lived all the way here. So I guess, as the business trip goes, that's the most effed up one.
From town to town across northern Italy, and in 1321 he died in Ravenna. Now, of course, Dante wasn't just faffing about with his 2 decades in exile. No, he was far too angry to just let this go. Whereas Machiavelli had tried to play it clever and win himself back into good political graces after being exiled from Florence, Dante had no filter whatsoever, so he doubled down on how much he hated the current state of the papacy. And what better way to express your discontent with ecclesiastical governance and vent your frustration with an unfair exile than to literally throw the Pope himself into the fiery pits of hell. So Dante ran with that feeling and proceeded to spend most of his exile composing the Divine Comedy, a 3-part epic poem that uses a journey through the Christian afterlife as an allegory for coping with the psychological pain of his exile. So we know why Dante put quill to parchment, but before we go digging into the lore of his mytho-historical afterlife, we should understand what kind of a writer Dante was. Let's be real here, you've all seen Red's classic summarized series on the Divine Comedy. I know.
I've seen the Inferno, not the other two.
But that's not what we're here for today, because this is History Makers, where I get to go into extremely esoteric analysis of the political and literary context of famous historical writers. The first 15 minutes of the lecture that nobody ever pays attention to. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, all the jokes aside, that is still true, isn't it? Because this video has 500,000 views, while those Legends Summarized and mythological videos gets millions of views. Yeah, that is sad to see because I love history, but yeah.
That's the quality content that I'm here to provide you with. Whew. Anyway, Dante's literary training started back when he was in Florence, hanging out with poets like Brunetto Latini and Guido Cavalcanti, who were all about drawing from classical sources like Seneca, Cicero, and Aristotle while breaking from the stuffy and worn-out style of Latin poetry. Dante's first forays into poetry were inspired by the love of his life, a Florentine lady named Beatrice Portinari. Now, Dante first met Beatrice when they were 9, saw her again once when he was 18, and that's pretty much it. If you ask me, that seems a little, sparse. course, so I'm not going to ponder the implications of that one for too long and generously file an under-childhood crush. I mean, Dante had a wife, but you wouldn't know it by reading his poetry. In 1294, Dante published La Vita Nuova, a collection of poems and prose commentary on his relationship with Beatrice, from their first meeting to Dante's grief after
His wife reading that is like, what the fuck is this?
her death in 1290. The core theme at work here is the idea that romantic love serves as a gateway to divine love. This notion matures during the early years of his exile, when earthly pleasures are understandably a little harder to come by, and his convivio tracks Dante's substitution of physical lust for his devotion to Lady Philosophy. I would ask why philosophy has to be a damsel in this allegory, but hey, it's better than nothing. Though Beatrice wasn't out of the picture for very long, despite her being dead and also not Dante's girlfriend, because her character basically becomes the entire narrative impetus for the Divine Comedy. So, let's talk story composition. A protagonist wants some goal, but there's an obstacle in their path which they have to overcome. Here, Dante's after divine salvation, which was represented by his love for Beatrice, but the pesky little roadblock here is this whole exile business. At its core, the Divine Comedy is a story about overcoming the trauma of being exiled. I mean, you know the drill. Dante starts out in the middle of some dark woods, Virgil shows up and tells him that the only way out is through literal hell, but it's okay because Beatrice is waiting for him on the other end, and it's off to the races. While the Inferno doesn't really have all that much in the way of character development, as Dante really only starts growing as a character during his cleansing on Mount Purgatory, the first book is steeped in the pain of exile and its effects on his mental and spiritual well-being. And this is where Dante really deviates from his predecessors in the field of epic poetry. Homer and Virgil both have scenes where our hero takes a quick hop into the underworld for an hour to schmooze with the dead, but Dante makes that jaunt the entire journey. To Dante, the underworld isn't just something that you can pop into and out of, because the underworld, i.e. death, i.e. exile, is a much more permanent deal that he as the character and as the author needed to come to terms with. But beyond Dante's own personal whatever, the real reason the Divine Comedy became such a hit was for its vivid depictions of hell, purgatory, and heaven. Eternal damnation has never been so scenic. See, from the time of Jesus through the Middle Ages, the conception of the afterlife had been a little hazy. There are descriptions of paradise and the kingdom of God spread throughout the New Testament, but this being the Bible, it's a little tricky to tell what's literal and what's figurative. Broadly speaking, though, Christian doctrine developed from pre-existing Jewish theology, so there's a nondescript underworldly dead place referred to interchangeably as Hades, Gehenna, and Sheol, and for those who are specifically saved by God's grace, they go to an otherworldly heavenly paradise. But it's not super clear whether this jump from death to heaven happens immediately, so some theologians figure that there might be some sort of waiting room. Meanwhile, others hope that there might be an opportunity to clean up their morality even after death in the hopes of getting into the kingdom of heaven. In the late 1100s, some theologians
So Dante put the vivid, visual of all the, death, afterlife, heaven, even the purgatory and everything. Damn. So Dante is where the most of the depiction comes from, because obviously in the Bible it would be not much in detail. Obviously, it would be some. I don't know much about Bible. It must be some indication of things, but not detailedly depicting and like that. So I guess Dante is the one who did that.
Explored the concept of a cleansing fire, a purgatorius ignis that souls would pass through to become purified before entering heaven. That's definitely a start, but it's still not terribly specific, so Dante had a lot of room to play around with. And in the process of developing his conceptions of hell, purgatory, and heaven, he also single-handedly invents the entire concept of world building. Dante's afterlife is loaded with characters, concepts, and even landmarks from Greek mythology, plus some medieval astronomy in there too for good measure, and they're all seamlessly incorporated into the Christian framework. This was a really big deal. While Homer and Virgil's epic poems took place in a pre-existing mythological world that would have been familiar to their contemporary audiences, Dante had single-handedly fashioned something completely new and unique.
Yeah, there would be some experience, right? Like, holy shit, this is completely new and so detailed. I mean, obviously I'm growing up, I'm more of a game guy, RPG games and things like that. So I remember first time ever I played Fallout New Vegas. I think it was first one I played New Vegas, not the 3. I had 3, but I didn't play it for whatever reason. I played New Vegas first because I liked the cover art and concept. So first time I played New Vegas and I realized like, holy shit, this whole world is awesome. So first time experiencing an entirely complete new world, not something that everybody kind of knows about, and then it I guess extends from that. No, completely new world. That would be some experience, right? Like, holy shit, this is awesome.
specialized geography, characters, and comprehensive narrative logic. The worlds he envisions are stunning, and they're packed full of figures from Christianity, Greek and Roman literature, and millennia of history. Any story that seamlessly drops Charon the Ferryman into the same underworld as Satan is bridging some serious gaps there. And one way or another, everything fits together in the Divine Comedy. Dante didn't need to go through every single one of his 25 circles, terraces, and spheres in his purpose-built cosmos with pinpoint detail, but when you're trying to single-handedly flex on over 2,000 years of Western literature, you gotta commit. Gosh,
Yeah.
the father of world building and the OG self-insert fanfic? Truly, Dante was a genius far ahead of his time. But for all of Dante's innovations, what did his contemporaries think of all of this hell-trotting purgatory?
Man, imagine if Dante was alive today. Not then. He would have born now with all his, intellect and everything. His ability to write and create this world. With all the things that we have today, all the history of different people creating different type of fictions and thing. And with all that kind of knowledge, what kind of a world and fiction he would have created. He could write for some movies or something in today's culture, or create some awesome novel or something. But imagine the kind of world he would have created, because his imagination is awesome. The way he created all these things, and it's not he expanded on something, he created entire new type of thing. That's some skill right there.
Climbing, heaven-flying Sheniganery. Well, Dante cast an extremely wide net of potential readers by dropping Latin to write his epic in the vernacular Italian, and opened up his work beyond the typical aristocratic audience. Readers from all over were so impressed with Dante's use of language that Italian, well, technically speaking it was Tuscan dialect, became the premier literary language in Europe for centuries. And of course, the more people read the Divine Comedy, the more they heard Dante's extremely sharp criticisms for the serial abuses of power within the papacy. I mean, you don't give St. Peter himself an entire speech about how disappointed he is with the recent popes without raising some eyebrows. In addition to many accusations of simony and nepotism, Dante argues that the political ambitions of the popes brings them into conflict with their neighbors, and thus kind of contradicts their whole claim to being a nonpartisan and universal church. Unfortunately, the church had just relocated to Avignon.
Yeah, this is why people say how pen is sharper than the sword, right? There's this saying like, pen has more power than any of the swords or any of the weapon comes into play. Like Dante in his books damaged papacy more than any other empire would have. Because obviously it spread the idea throughout the world and people saw what it is.
On France for the next century, and soon enough we're going to have a great schism on our hands, so in the short term, a lot of Dante's criticisms got brushed aside. But in 200 years, Martin Luther will start to sing a very similar tune to our Tuscan poet here. So, looking through Dante's historical context and the means by which he created his unique take on the Christian afterlife, I don't think it's all too hot a take to say that Dante marked an extremely significant break from all of the literature that came before him. In a tradition steeped in pre-existing mythology, Dante said, I think I'll do it myself, and then fleshed out every last detail of his own original universe. And I mean that literally. Heaven is one giant space with flowers sticking out of it. While Dante's afterlife, as written, didn't make it into Christian doctrine, he solidified the popular belief in a kind of purgatory between death and heaven, and he had a monumental impact on the aesthetic of Christian afterlife art through the Renaissance and beyond. Though beliefs will vary by time and place, even within a single religion, modern Catholicism tends to view hell and purgatory more as conditions of the soul in the absence of God rather than any specific pits underground or mountains in the middle of the ocean, and many Protestant groups have dropped the concepts entirely. But regardless, I think we can all appreciate Dante's genius as a philosopher, as a historian, as a world builder, and quite literally as one damn fine storyteller.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. Between Machiavelli.
Damn, seriously, Dante's impact was awesome. I didn't realize that before. I mean, he kick-started, Renaissance. I didn't know that. That's huge. And he was so angry with Florence, and everything happened with papacy and everything. He started to write things because that's the only thing he could. But that was so good that it had an impact. It spread the idea throughout the entire Europe, and people start to, I guess, make fun of papacy too. So that is something. So that just shows that how pen is more stronger than the sword, I guess. That is just ridiculous. And his ideas even carried over today in lots of fiction. Because I'm pretty sure there are lots of people who don't realize that there are lots of stuff like purgatory and other things that people assign to Bible, like this biblical thing, where people make some kind of science fiction TV show or anything. People don't realize that this is already a science fiction from Dante, taken from Dante's Inferno and things like that. That is just ridiculous. Alright people, that was History Maker Dante. If you like my reaction, don't like subscribe, check out the reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast with different playlists like Oli Sarcastic production. Upload lots of videos in 24 hours. 2 from this channel, 1 is history video like this, and after 6 hours some kind of mythological video or something from Red. So check out that playlist, it's all there. Check out the playlist too, like history, internet historian, CGP Grey, Tier Zoo, and yeah, I'll see you next time.